Hey everybody, and welcome to your first lesson on World War One. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk specifically about the causes of World War One and what those causes mean. So we are going to start our slideshow. All right, here we are. World War One. Many of you have been really excited about World War One, which I think is great. World War One is going to be broken into 3 lessons: the causes, the war itself, and the entrance of the United States, which is going to talk about like the technology involved, and the last one is the effects of World War One. So to get started today, we're going to talk about 3 important words. If you don't take anything away from this today, make sure you know what these 3 isms are. When you guys do word work, we talk about prefixes and suffixes. And this ism suffix comes at the end of all 3 of these words. The first word that you need to know is nationalism. So nationalism is important because it's a strong pride in your country. During this time, especially in Europe, there were strong feelings of nationalism. Everybody thought that their country was the best country around. Now, one thing to consider about nationalism is that sometimes having that feeling of nationalism kind of leads you down the wrong path. Sometimes it's blind nationalism, where people would be willing to turn a blind eye to some things that are not so great going on. Think about like football teams. During football season or baseball season, any kind of sport really, even if you don't watch it, you know that there are people who have strong senses of pride in their team. Their team might be the worst team in the league, but they love that team. Their team might be the best team in the league, and then they're super arrogant and they talk about how great their team is all the time and how much better than your team their team is. Okay? This is the same kind of stuff that's going on between countries in Europe at this time. Now, because of their nationalism, a lot of these countries are also embracing our next ism, which is militarism, which is just what it sounds like. It means that these countries were building really strong militaries to achieve their goals. Most of their goals were about imperialism. We talked a ton last unit about imperialism, and that imperialism is just the idea that we're going to spread and expand our empire into other parts of the world. We talked about how the American empire grew during the turn of the century when we acquired the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam as a result of the Spanish-American War. Well, countries in Europe had been building their empires for a long time. At this time, Great Britain, you might know it, actually owned India. Okay? Great Britain was known for its gigantic and expanding empire. It owned a lot of land in northern Africa even. But they weren't the only country. A lot of these countries in Europe were building these giant empires because they were nationalists and our country's the best, so we should take our country and spread it out into other parts of the world, and we're going to build a strong military to do it. Without those 3 isms, we would not have had World War I. So make sure you know nationalism, militarism, and imperialism. Okay? World War I began in 1914. That's important. Notice we've officially left the turn of the century. We stopped the turn of the century in like 1912-ish. And what happens in 1914 is there's this guy with a super cool name called Franz Ferdinand, and he was the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. He was assassinated, which was widely regarded as the main incident that caused World War I. So a little bit of backstory. Austria-Hungary was expanding its empire, and as a part of its empire, Austria-Hungary took over Serbia, which was a smaller nation in Europe. The people who lived in Serbia were none too pleased. So when Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his family were visiting Sarajevo in Serbia, a Bosnian terrorist actually killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And this is really the conflict. This is the small incident between 2 countries that caused war to break out between all of the countries in Europe. Okay, here's Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie and their 3 children in 1910. This mustache right here, man, it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. But he was not the most beloved in his own country. But to kill the leader of another country is an act of terrorism. And there were some countries who agreed with that and some countries who did not. So, as a result, one guy is killed, is a conflict between two countries, but now these countries start to build and act upon their alliances. So an alliance is like a team. If your best friend wants help doing something, you want to go help them do it. You have an alliance with that person. We see things like alliances in game shows, and Survivor is what I always think of when I think of an alliance, which I'm sure you're probably too young for, but that's okay. So these people are building alliances, and these countries have friends that they're going to agree to protect. So listen to kind of how this fell. It's essentially a domino effect. Okay, so if you've ever seen dominoes, you know the first one falls and then all of the other ones after it fall. The first domino to fall is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Okay, the Bosnian terrorist kills the leader of Austria-Hungary. Well, as soon as Germany starts to try and convince Serbia that they need to back off, what happens is Russia comes to Serbia's aid, and Russia says, you can't bully Serbia. Serbia is our friend. You need to back off. So Germany declares war on Russia, and Russia's friend France. So Great Britain, who's also friends with France, says, hey Germany, you can't do that, and now Great Britain is declaring war on Germany. Okay, a few months later, the Ottoman Empire and Italy are going to enter the war in 1915. So it's just this big nasty domino effect. We've got this big tangle of countries that are friends and countries who aren't friends trying to protect one another. And it essentially causes this war that takes up all of the countries in Europe. Okay. This map right here is all of Europe. Notice that we've got the green ones here are Central Powers. We know the Central Powers to be I'm sorry, not the green ones are Central Powers. The green ones are Allied Powers. The Allied Powers began as just Great Britain, France, Serbia, and Russia. And then over the next few months, these countries started to call upon their countries that they owned as a part of their empire to ask them to fight with them. Italy joined in defense of France and Great Britain. And then on the other side, we see the Central Powers in red. So the Central Powers specifically started with Germany and Austria-Hungary, and then later Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire, which later becomes known as Turkey. Notice there's a lot more green than there is red. The yellow countries are neutral. They are isolationists. They're staying out of this mess. They don't have a dog in the fight. They don't want to be a part of it. And even though there is a lot more green on this map than there is red, the location of Germany and Austria-Hungary kind of gave it an advantage. It was in the middle. And then not only that, but they were known for their militarism. They had built these gigantic militaries that they were about to unleash on the rest of Europe. And just to recap, here's a final chart to help you kind of remember. Your Allied powers are Serbia, Russia, France, Belgium, Great Britain, and Italy. Belgium was not known for its militarism, but a lot of the fighting was done because of Belgium. The reason for that is because Belgium is where a lot of the crops were grown that the Allies needed. Belgian wheat was a big thing. And then Central Powers, you've got Austria-Hungary, Germany, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. So when we come back for tomorrow's lesson, we are going to talk about what the war was like. We're going to talk a lot about why the United States ends up getting involved, because right now we don't want anything to do with it, and the sinking of the HMS Lusitania. So come back tomorrow. We will talk more. And until then, I'll see you later, historians.